you go on presentation mode.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. My name is Jessica Keller. I'm a registered dietitian at the KU ADRC and also KUMC. I'm a PhD candidate. I kind of work in the ketogenic diet wheelhouse, but have a well-rounded background in overall nutrition. So we'll just kind of get started. We'll do some background on nutrition and Alzheimer's disease, and then we'll switch focus over to a little bit of information about our study, our currently enrolling study, which is called the Therapeutic Diets and Alzheimer's Disease Study, or TDAT. Okay, so just some background. Alzheimer's disease is a hypometabolic disease. And what that means is the brain suffers from a overall lack of fuel. Basically, if we think about our body as a vehicle or a car, we're not getting the appropriate fuel to the brain. We're either not getting it there, or once it's there, we're not using it effectively. And there are a lot of hypotheses surrounding this. Obviously, there's a lot to learn about Alzheimer's disease, and that's why a lot of funding goes toward this. And the disease is generally unique to each individual, although it can follow similar patterns across different groups. But basically, some of the hypotheses there are that, like I said, maybe we're not getting the fuel to our brain effectively. Maybe once we get it into the brain, it's not crossing the blood-brain barrier due to a carrier protein issue. Maybe once it gets to the astrocyte neuron, we're unable to take that fuel up into the cell and use it effectively. Or maybe once it's in the cell, our mitochondria aren't using it effectively. So there's a lot going on there, obviously. But that also gives us a lot of ground to cover in terms of research and approaches. So glucose is the preferred fuel source of the body. Glucose comes from carbohydrate containing foods. Carbohydrates are plants. But we can also create glucose from glucogenic proteins, or those proteins that can enter the same pathways that glucose does. So that's because of the way that humans have eaten over the span of our existence. We tend to rely on carbohydrates more than fat. And obviously, when protein was around, we indulged ourselves there as well. But over time, in general, glucose utilization does decrease, but we see that it decreases more in those individuals with Alzheimer's disease than those that do not. So there is something going on there. A ketogenic diet is a high-fat, very low carbohydrate and adequate protein diet. It's not high protein, which can be confusing at times, but this diet has been used as a therapeutic diet or intervention diet for a lot of different brain-related disease states. We call it ketogenic because when we enter into a lack of carbohydrates, our body will produce what are called ketone bodies. But this comes from the breakdown of fats or fatty acids. So that's where the keto part comes from. And the ketone bodies are basically a form of reduced fatty acids. So this diet has been used therapeutically it started in the 1920s for refractory epilepsy or epilepsy that does not respond to medications. But it's also been used in MS, Parkinson's, traumatic brain injury, multiple concussion syndrome, depression, anxiety, and of course, Alzheimer's disease. So it has been shown to be successful in a lot of different areas or disease states in terms of the brain. And that's because neurons will preferentially use ketone bodies over glucose. So we don't necessarily understand why. It's definitely probably a response to starvation. If ketones are around, the brain will take them up because the brain needs to survive. But in general, the ketogenic diet modifies energy metabolism. Ketone bodies and fatty acids go through a different metabolic pathway than glucose and protein. And therefore, we can really circumvent that main metabolic pathway that glucose goes through and get fuel into that car in a much different way. And to our knowledge, this use of ketone bodies does not go away with aging because it really is a survival mechanism. So we'll shift a little bit and just talk about the study. So what we're doing is a randomized control trial. So you either get in one group or the other. It's a flip of a coin. I hit a button and you go into either group. You don't get to choose, but we are funded by the NIA, which is the National Institute on Aging, which is part of the NIH. It's a 1-to-1 ketogenic diet. That 1-to-1 ratio just means that the diet is 1 gram of fat to 1 gram of combined carbohydrate and protein. A lot of those therapeutic interventions with the ketogenic diet are a 4-to-1 ratio. Those can be very restrictive. The diet that we're doing is a 1-to-1, so it's not as restrictive. There's a lot more variety and palatability there. We supplement with medium chain triglyceride oil, and it is a true supplement. So it helps boost people into ketosis. And we call the other study arm a control, but really we believe that both of these diets are beneficial. There's been a lot of research done about the therapeutic lifestyle changes diet, and we know that it's good. We know that it works. So really what we're trying to do is compare one diet to the other and see which is better. A lot of randomized controlled trials have a control group that's a placebo or something of that nature. We actually do believe that both of these diets, either of these diets, would be beneficial for those individuals with Alzheimer's or individuals with a number of other disease states, or just better for overall health, especially depending on what your baseline eating pattern was to begin with. So what we're looking at in terms of the study, our outcomes would be changes in cognitive function. We really do hypothesize that we'll see a potential improvement in cognitive function on either of the diets. And if not improvement, a delay or a plateau of individuals declining. So I always like to try and remind people that staying the same can be just as much a victory as getting better, especially in a disease like Alzheimer's, where people can decline fairly rapidly or quickly and then plateau and then quickly and plateau and things like this. We're also looking at changes in biomarkers. So those would be like insulin sensitivity, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the eating patterns. Mitochondrial function, so how efficient our cells use the fuel that we put into the car. Lipid homeostasis, so that would be your cholesterol panels, things like that. So also, cardiometabolic measures and anthropometrics, things like that, your height, weight, waist circumference, how things change in that regard. And then the MRS, that's like an MRI. It's a little different, but it's a scan of the brain. So we do look at a pre and post brain scan and see not only what's going on the surface, like how we're thinking, how we're acting, what we can remember, word finding ability, that kind of thing, but also what's going on internally in the brain. So our dietary intervention is 12 weeks long. So you're on the diet for 12 weeks. But then we have a 4-week washout period where we ask people to go back to their normal eating pattern. And then we give you a call at 16 weeks and we check in and see, what's been going on. Did you feel better? Did you feel worse? Did you feel about the same after doing the diet and then stopping for a while? So really it's about 16 weeks of the actual study, but only those 12 weeks are actually following the diet. So this is just looking at who we're trying to enroll. So we are looking for individuals with Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's disease. The MMSE is a screening tool. It is the mini mental state exam, and that score range is 17 to 28. That is basically saying we're looking for individuals with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease, not the individuals that are advanced. We do require cooperation from an appropriate study partner. That person should be a person that checks in with that participant at least once a day, can help potentially procure food and prepare foods. Somebody who can also help hold that person accountable. We do not require that study partner follow the diet, although in my experience, it's quite helpful if that person does that as well. We do require that individuals speak English. Our age range is 50 to 90. We can make exceptions here and there, but that is probably an all-encompassing age range for the individuals we're looking for. We do ask that people be medication stable, so no changes in medication in the past 30 days. And our BMI range is 20 or above. With any diet study, there is the potential for weight loss. We certainly don't want to contribute to frailty in any way. So that's why that BMI range is a little higher than the normal BMI range. And then just some things that we exclude people, anyone who can't control their diet. So somebody who's in a nursing home or memory care clinic unit or something like that, they have to be in control of what they're eating. It is a diet study. And then some potentially confounding medical risks. So insulin-dependent diabetes, any cancer within 5 years that requires chemo or radiation, recent cardiac events within the last year, renal stones within the last year. And then the study team, can determine, of course, there can be outlying conditions that we would deem inappropriate for joining the study. We do require that people are not in another clinical trial. We want to be able to contribute our findings to the diet itself. And then women who are childbearing or with the childbearing capacity, we can't have pregnancy in the study. And then weight above 350 pounds, that's our upper limit there. So this is kind of who we're looking for in terms of enrollment. So now we'll get to the fun part, the eating patterns. So the TLC or heart healthy diet is on the left and the ketogenic diet is on the right. And I like to put them side by side like this because they're vastly different and yet attempt to achieve the same goals. And I think that's fascinating, but I'm biased because I'm a dietitian. So the TLC diet is a low fat diet. So limited saturated fat, limited cholesterol, no trans fat, which, there's trans fat hidden some places, but it's predominantly left most of the marketplace. And we also try to limit sodium in the heart healthy diets. I'd like to point out that we emphasize that in either of these diets, that individuals eat whole, real foods and really limit processed foods. And by doing that, you're really going to limit your sodium intake. The places that we get our sodium in the diet actually really come from processed foods, not from the salt shaker. So by limiting those processed foods, we basically limit sodium as well. In the heart healthy diet, we also emphasize fiber. That's the supplement that we give in that study arm. But we also really that's a supplement. We want it to supplement the diet. We really want people to eat a lot of fruits and veggies in the TLC diet. It really focuses on the quality of carbohydrate versus the quantity of carbohydrate that we see in the ketogenic diet. So that's the main difference between the two. We still would like everyone to get a lot of fiber, but it looks a bit different. And the bottom line here that shows the distribution of calories is really just for your information to give you an idea of how different these diets are. So we'll switch over to the ketogenic diet. Sorry, I had to get a sip of water there. It's a high fat, very low carbohydrate diet. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, there was the Atkins diet. And it can be a misstep for people to think that the ketogenic diet is actually a high protein diet. It is not. It is a high fat diet. And so therefore we can have no starchy vegetables. That would be your beans, peas, corn, potatoes, root vegetables, and no fruits, although we do allow a handful of berries per day, and it's coming up on berry season. So I know people are pretty pumped about that. So there is room for a little bit of those antioxidant containing fruits in the ketogenic diet. It also emphasizes non-starchy vegetables. So, and I've got this bolded at the bottom of this slide, both of these diets emphasize 4 to 6 servings of non-starchy vegetables per day. The ketogenic diet is trending for weight loss, and I'm sure people have seen a lot of things about keto out there, and it can be bacon wrapped, cheese smothered, mayonnaise dipped. That's really, and that'll get you into ketosis, don't get me wrong, but really what we're trying to do is emphasize a more healthful approach to getting into ketosis. So we really do want people to eat those whole real foods, non-starchy vegetables that contain those antioxidants as well. Again, always have to emphasize that it's moderate protein. This is not a high protein diet. And we also try to get people to eat fewer processed meats than some other ketogenic diet approaches take. And again, there's the calorie distribution there. So you can see 60 to 75% fat as compared to 25 to 35%. That's wildly different. Carbohydrate is 10% only in the ketogenic diet. And some people will even go lower than that. In the heart healthy diet, it's 50 to 60%. So that's where we're looking at the quantity of carbohydrate in the ketogenic diet versus the quality of carbohydrate in the TLC diet. And then the protein obviously can range. I do also want to point out that we're trying to take a healthful approach to the ketogenic diet and get those healthful fats. So those omega-3 fatty acids that are really good for the brain, they're anti-inflammatory. We really want the diet to consist of, things like avocado, nuts, seeds like hemp, chia, and flaxseed, fatty fish, things that really are really good brain fuel is what we tend to call it. This is a busy slide, but it just kind of lays out the study. We can do the study in 4 visits. We can do the study in 6 visits. Generally, for people that come in from out of town, we can do it in 4 visits just to limit the travel time. For those people that are local, we tend to do it in 6 visits. If we do it in 4, it can make for a couple long days. So either way, there's some flexibility there. But we have a screening visit up front. We draw safety labs. We do that brief cognitive screener. We talk about how you've been doing, how you've been feeling, get kind of a baseline idea of what's going on, a health history, look at your medications, things like that. That's 1 to 2 weeks before the baseline visit. The baseline visit, we draw blood again. We do some cognitive testing. We look at your symptoms again. We look at the antioxidant deposition in your skin, which I think is really neat. It's an objective way of looking at fruit and vegetable intake. And we like to get that, pushed up throughout the study. So that's a fun one. I think a good motivational thing that we do. We also do a brain scan. We randomize people to the diet. We do the education, and we get you started on the diet. We then do a midpoint we do a midpoint visit, which is a 6-week visit. We draw blood again. We talk about how things have been going in terms of symptoms. We look at that deposition of antioxidants in the skin, and we continue to do the diet education and break down barriers and look at the challenges that are going on in the diet. And then at the end of the study, we do the same thing. We do at baseline because we want to compare it from the beginning to the end. So we do the blood work. We do the cognitive testing. We look at those skin carotenoids. We talk about the diet and see how things have been going. We do another brain scan. And you can see that in between the baseline, the 6-week, and the end of study visits, you're going to check in with the dietitian. Lucky for you, that's me. So we check in once a week for the first 6 weeks, and then every other week for the last 6 weeks, at least. That's a minimum. I chat with people far more often than that sometimes. So, but one of the great benefits of joining any clinical trial is getting that added care from health professionals. So getting that one-on-one counseling from a dietitian on a very regular basis, getting the blood work done, talking with clinicians, talking about symptoms and what's going on is just one of those added benefits of joining clinical research in general. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing real quick and pull something else up so we can start with questions. I do have a cooking demonstration coming up, and that will be July 14th. Let's see if I can't share my screen again. All right. So I'll pop this up. This has my contact information. So you can see at the bottom here, there's my email address. There's my phone number if you'd like to register for the cooking demonstration. If you want to follow up with any questions that you might have, I'm always happy to direct people to any articles or research that they might want to read more about either of the diets or what's been going on historically. But for now, jot this down. I have fun at these cooking demonstrations. We get to eat food, which is my favorite thing. Otherwise, I will hand it over to any questions that people might have.
Thank you, Jessica. We're so glad that you were able to join us live today and share that information with us. Does anyone have any questions? Jessica, it seems like maybe everything was really thorough and we don't have any questions. Oh, we do have a question from Karen. How do you see or measure skin carcinogens?
Carotenoids. Yeah,
Carotenoids, thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. It's a funny word. I love that question because we call it a veggie meter, which I think is super fun. So it's basically a portable small spectrometer. And what it does is we put your finger into a device that applies pressure. So it moves the blood away from the fingertip. It doesn't stick you. It's just a light bulb. But there's a lever that pushes down on the finger and it shines a light up into the skin. And carotenoids that are found in those really vibrant colored fruits and vegetables, those dark green leafies, those bell peppers and things like that, squash and sweet potatoes, they leave a certain, it's a carotenoid in the skin, and those give off a certain wavelength when you shine light on it. We can measure that wavelength. And so when we deposit it in the skin, we shine the light up, it measures the reflections, and it gives us that objective measure of how many servings of these types of foods you've been eating every day. It's kind of like an average, like think of your A1C, your hemoglobin A1C. It's an average over time. So we can really see, how it was when you started, how it is at 6 weeks, how it was at the end of the study. And I think it's really fun because it gives you a visual. You can see it on a histogram of where you land compared to other people that we measure. And it's a challenge. You get to, I need to eat more fruits and vegetables, or if you're on keto, just vegetables. So it's fun, but it is a validated tool, and it is an objective way of measuring vegetable and fruit intake.
Thanks, Jessica. It looks like we have 2 other questions about the study. The first one is, when does the study start, and will the cooking demo be available virtually?
Yeah, great question. So it is a rolling enrollment study, rolling recruitment. So we've been enrolling people, that rascally COVID got us down for a little while there, but we're kind of in our infancy in this study, but we'll be recruiting and enrolling for the next 2 to 3 years. So really, we're flexible at getting people scheduled. We can really do it around your schedule, especially if people are traveling now and things like that. But yeah, so it really just depends on when people want to get started. And then the cooking demo. So the July 14th will be recorded. It won't be live streamed, but we'll record it. And then we'll put it out there through a lot of different ADRC mechanisms. But you won't get to taste the food. So I definitely recommend coming in person if you can.
Absolutely. Looks like we've got another question about the veggie meter. What's a good number on the veggie meter?
Oh, that's an interesting question, and debatable for sure. So the scale goes up, it goes from 0 to 800. I'll tell you what, that 800 is I've never seen anyone above 600. So I think even vegetarians, so it's really hard to get up there. But really, we hope that people are above 250. That I think that's a good goal to get to. But yeah, anywhere from, I've seen as high as, 650. I'll give you a hint. That was a dietitian. So we hope that people hit 250, I think, is a good number to reach for.
Thank you. It looks like we've got a question about some reading materials. If we wish to learn more about keto diets, are there certain books you would recommend?
Oh, books. I haven't read any keto books per se. There's a lot of good literature out there, though, in terms of research and different approaches and things like that. And certainly, if you're interested in reading more about this, I mean, there's a lot of keto cookbooks out there. I've just got a great one that's called Ketotarian, which is a plant-based approach to a keto diet that has a lot of discussion around the recipe. So it's not just a straight up cookbook. You can read a little bit of history about the dishes and why people would be using the ingredients that they are and things like that. But certainly, if you are interested in reading more, do jot down that email that's on the cooking demonstration flyer and shoot me an email, and I can send you some good articles, and some, there are some that aren't super sciencey, I guess, that could really help people to better understand the background, why people were doing this, how we got to where we are, and things like that.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we've got another question out there. Does a person have to have AD to participate in the cooking demo?
Absolutely not. Nope. It is just an informational cooking demonstration. Obviously, we do hope to reach individuals who might know someone who would be interested in joining the study, or individuals themselves who might be interested in joining the study. That's just the business side of things, but absolutely not. No, we want people to be able to learn about both of the diets. And really, one of my major goals when I do these demonstrations is to talk about how vastly different these diets are, and yet show you how similar they can be in terms of how they taste. When you look at the diets on paper, you can say, oh, I don't think I'd want to eat all that fat, or, ooh, I don't think I'd want to restrict all that fat. But then, we make a couple dishes side by side, and people get to taste them and go, oh, wow, these, even though these are vastly different diets, they still both taste delicious. But maybe that's because I'm a great cook. I don't know.
All right, Jessica, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Oh, one more just popped in. There are several good books by Dr. Mary Newport, whose husband had Alzheimer's disease. So that might be something that's helpful for people as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Good resource there. All right. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for hopping on today and helping out with that technical difficulty we were having. It's much better to have you live. So thank you for that. And as a reminder, everyone, our weekly presentation, we'll have another webinar next Thursday at 2:00. So look out for that information in your My Alliance Monday email, or go to our website at kualzheimers.org. This presentation recording will be available on our YouTube channel shortly, which you can find by navigating to our website under weekly webinars or by using the link on our reminder email. If you have any questions or comments in the meantime, feel free to email myalliance@kumc.edu. Thanks again, Jessica, and thanks for everyone for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.